What would you say is happening right now, or why is this approach for leadership needed now more than ever? It's always been helpful, but why now? What is unique about this moment that makes serving leadership even more necessary right now?
You're listening to the High Purpose Leadership Podcast with Dr. Mike McCormick. Conversations from leaders to leaders in this post-pandemic age. This is part 2 of our interview with Dr. Ken Jennings, best-selling author, consultant, and speaker in healthcare strategy and leadership development. In this episode, we'll be talking about why teaming is the new leading.
What is unique about this moment that makes serving leadership even more necessary right now?
Yeah, I think we look back over time, a new paradigm emerges when there's significant dissatisfaction with the current paradigm. And for many of the reasons that you just touched on, and maybe some you left untouched, we're dissatisfied with the approaches leaders around us are taking and the results they're getting. From the macro, we're in a land war in Asia. In Europe. We're in a land war in Europe at the moment with a failure of leadership. We dealt with COVID with a not well-led, but well-intentioned approach to helping us. So we step back and say, we could do better if we just served our customers and each other with respect and dignity. And in the corporate world, because we now have more choices on where we can work and how we can work, I think employees are saying, I want something more out of just being told what to do or monitored. I want to be included. So there's a gathering dissatisfaction with the current paradigm, and that makes room for a new paradigm around serving to take shape. And I'm seeing it. My phone call this morning was so amazing with this CEO to say, this is the solution I've been looking for my whole life. And now I'm in a position to make changes happen for my organization. What do you feel about partnering together? Easiest sales experience I've ever had, but one that got me totally excited.
Yeah, and to your point, I think there's a generation, or whether it's physicians or other leaders out there who were in more of a formative stage earlier in their career, and now they're in these roles, they're in these positions of executive leadership, and so they're ready to try their new approach. Things that have resonated with them for years, but they've not been in the seat necessarily to make some of those calls and to set the culture. They could do it in their pocket where they were, but now a lot of those individuals are in the top seat, if you will, and so for them to take that role and flip it upside down and say, hey, I'm actually going to create a serving culture here, because it fits with me, it's what's best for the people we serve, and oh yeah, by the way, it works too. So for such a time as this, serving leadership is here. You've been saying something for several years now, and one of the things that I love about you, Ken, is you're out ahead, and even the book on changing healthcare was written way before a lot of the mainstream changes that are happening right now. You were writing about those in the late 90s. So you're always out ahead of the curve as from a change standpoint and culture standpoint. And you've been saying something to me for many years, and I'm starting to see it become true. And this phrase is, teaming is the new leading. Teaming is the new leading. So we know what serving leadership is. You just talked to us about that, but why do you say now that teaming is the new leading?
Yeah, a couple, 3 things. One is that the time is right for teams to step up into leadership as a group of individuals that commit to each other as a team. It's driven by, we're all working more virtually or hybrid, in increasingly complex, increasingly challenging problems that a leader, a heroic leader, just can't handle all of the complexity and the challenge. But teams, by their nature, are designed for complexity and change together. So I started thinking about how we can unleash the power of teams at every level to co-lead corporations as they pursue strategies. So I've been playing with this phrase, teaming is the new leading. And I guess I'm under contract to write a book of that title.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that'll come out. And I'm using it to help me think through it. But secondly, why I think this is true is because we've had a couple of decades of serving with an ing for leadership. So teaming with the ing is a similar kind of thing. It's not what leaders say they're going to do, it's what they are doing. In this case, it's not what teams say they're going to do, but what are the high performing teams actually doing? So I'm trying to push into this idea of the highest performing teams. You can catch them in action. And
Mm-hmm.
I perceive now that there are five sets of things that they are actually doing. They're all related to the serving leader, but a new set of practices that are appropriate for the team level of activity. Maybe I'll just leave it there and
Well, either.
ask your listeners to wait for the book. We'll see the five specific actions, but it'll seem familiar to the readers of the serving leader.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's a little teaser. I love it. I do see right now this shift happening, and the serving approach is both practical and a heart orientation, for a different motive and a different approach, a different practical way of doing things. That can still produce, though, individuals who are doing that. And where I'm seeing some of the shift is in leadership communities, groups of people. And sometimes it's the same group over a period of time. But sometimes, to your point on teaming, sometimes it's groups of people who wouldn't normally work together, don't have a regular team, but for a particular project, for an initiative, for this particular space, they have to come together and work together quickly to get it done and then move on to the next one. So the fast pace and the quick change and the complexity requires differences to be able to come together, to integrate, to unify, get the job done, and then maybe split up and go do that again with another group of people. So it's a different culture for sure. I'm actually just curious about and I know we're seeing a lot of this in the consulting stuff that we're doing, but what are you seeing? Just give us a couple examples of the way work is actually being done right now. I kind of talked theoretically about that, but give us a couple examples of how do you actually see groups of people coming together to work on particular projects? How do you see that teaming work being done right now?
Yeah, I can probably give a practical example. I've just finished 3 months of work with a healthcare organization in the Southwest. And we needed to get to the future a lot faster. So I introduced this idea of teaming, that a team can handle complexity at speed and challenge. And we brought together every other week or so in a workshop fashion key leaders from other teams. They weren't naturally fit together as teammates. They were, in many cases, the number one or number two leader from other teams. And they weren't regularly teaming together. But I had the support of senior leadership to bring this group that wasn't used to working together to say, you're now a teaming community. And for the next several months, we're going to meet every other week for half to three quarters of a day. And they're like, what? You're asking me for the better part of a day every other week? No way. But their bosses were behind it and they thought I was an okay guy. And they said, we'll grudgingly start with one or two. And after the first experience of actually using the actions
Yeah.
of high performing teaming, we used every workshop as a chance to make a major breakthrough.
Mm.
They all got to work with everybody else. At the end of several months, they said, fastest time to achievement I've ever experienced. I loved working in a teaming environment, and I don't want to lose this as an element of our culture. So please stick around with this as an approach. And third, I see how I can lead differently
Yes.
with my teammates. So
Yes.
I've set up for them now to do more of this throughout the organization. So I hope that example answers your question, Mike.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, the kind of meeting rhythms that people are so used to, and in particular with the virtual workspace right now, how do you bring them strategically together at different mile markers and in a timeline of work that needs to be done with key objectives along the way? So you sort of get this coming together of diverse groups, and some usually a physical gathering in a common space could be done virtually on a call, a teaming call, and then people are going back out doing their own work in their sub teams and then coming back together. So you kind of get this rhythm
That,
of back and forth that
that's
seems to
terrific.
work. Yep.
And I think people are joining these virtually, hybrid. We brought people mostly together physically after it was safe from COVID. And of course, everybody loves working in person again. But this is meant to be sprint like, if you know agile technology, and
Yes.
the way good teams can work.
Yep. Two other examples I was just thinking about as work we've done. One in healthcare, the dyad approach, where you get a clinical person and a staff or an admin person, two different worlds in healthcare, and you put them on the same team, right? You make them partners or co-leaders of a region or a territory, part of the hospital, and they lead together, bringing the clinical and the administrative side together. Normally, two worlds. You bring them together. I'm thinking about a faith-based group that we worked with, where we had, field leaders who were out there working, and then we had functional leaders, sort of, typically support type functions. And the field leaders usually did their things, and the functional people usually did their things, and we're bringing them together for conversations, right? So a lot of teaming is facilitated group conversation so that people who wouldn't normally talk to each other, or at least, have good two-way dialogue. They may ping an email or a thing back and forth, but actually a conversation with each other for a short time, very condensed, very focused, to make a breakthrough. And then they move out and they do their continual work. And that kind of rhythm of bringing, groups of people together for their common purpose and then letting them have their space and coming back. And that seems to be working really well right now.
Well, I should interview you on this, Mike. You're among the best I've ever seen at making that kind of style of working. And I started smiling as soon as you mentioned this client. I think this will remain one of the most satisfying experiences in my career,
Yeah.
working with these world-changing leaders. All we did was invite them out of their comfort zones and out of their box and
Yeah.
use some of this teaming uh, kinds of organizing our work. An incredible organization. I think it's going to make a difference around the world, from Africa to Asia to North America.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's this podcast, we call it the High Purpose Podcast because it's all about finding high purpose people, organizations, and getting behind them to lift them up to accomplish their great purpose. And what a privilege it is that you and I have had over you for sure more years than I, but together doing this, and there's still such a runway of need for companies and faith-based organizations alike to really now more than ever, accomplish their cause. Now more than ever, the world needs the leaders out there. And I guess that I just got one more question for us because I know our time is running away from us. Could talk all day, but I'm thinking about the generation my age and younger, and a group of people who are maybe sort of coming of age in their leadership, but have seen a style of leadership that they're really not interested in emulating. The top-down heroic leader. We talk about kind of a Superman or a Wonder Woman, someone who's kind of Atlas, holding the world up on their shoulders and just caving under that pressure. And we're seeing this across the board, that this next generation sees that kind of leadership and says, that didn't work, for one, and I'm not interested in that kind of pace or that kind of shouldering that kind of weight all by myself. I'm just not interested in that. So for those who are hesitant to step into leadership, because while they may be hesitant, we need leaders. We need high purpose leaders. There's more causes right now that are significant that, we need good people. The problems that I'm seeing are not because of, bad people doing bad things. The problems are because a lot of the good people are unwilling to step up right now because they're just hesitant, to step in and grab a hold of that responsibility. So what would you say to a young leader who's maybe hesitant and maybe they think leadership means taking everything on the world myself? How could teaming help them take a step toward ownership of their piece of the pie today?
Well, it's a great question, Mike. Um, my encouragement, and it isn't just the up and coming younger leaders, this is for my generation as well, to reconsider
Mm,
um, how you lead and live. In fact, that's my first point, is that there's no difference between how you live and how you lead. That living has to do with influencing, noticing things, getting common direction, the enjoyment of what you're doing. It's living your life. Leadership, guess what? Is joining with others, noticing what works, inviting them along. Living and leading have a lot to do with each other. So if there's a dissatisfaction with how I'm living my life, it will also bleed into a dissatisfaction with how others are leading. And if I want to live differently, it carries with it a chance to also lead differently. So think about the actions we talked about. Leading with higher purpose in mind. How good is that?
mm.
It's a leadership trait. Inviting others to use their strengths. Like if you have kids, what are they good at? Encourage them in that direction. Why not live that way and lead that way? What about breaking through barriers, blaze the trail, helping others to achieve their goals? We do that at in life and at work, and it works. So my encouragement is pay attention to what feels good, works well, from your heart to what actually works in life, and then be courageous about bringing that to the workplace. I think you'll find it was validated by good researchers. Jim Collins did his book, Good to Great, still
Yep.
has a great impact. And he focused on finding the leadership styles and leaders of the best and enduring companies. And it
Mm,
wasn't what you think. It wasn't the top down kind of leader. These were serving leaders that were personally humble. He called them level 5 leaders, um, that would grow fruit on other people's trees. So I think that it's been validated, research wise, that the kind of style we talked about works. And I would contend it works both to the delight of your life partners as well as your leadership partners. That's why I think my encouragement is going to resonate with those that want to lead and live a little differently. Thanks for
Well
asking
said.
that question.
Well said, Ken. Well, hey, it's been a great conversation, and I just personally want to thank you for inviting me into your leadership community, being able to do it together. And I'm very, very hopeful that the people who are listening to this will be encouraged and also stick around for future podcasts because we'll be delving into different parts of the kind of things that you and I talk about, the kind of work that we do, and even getting to meet some of the clients that we've worked with, some of those high purpose people who are out there doing good work. And as you and I know, we learn as much from them and from each other as possible. So hopefully this will become a leadership community that's growing and taking some of the investment that you've made and seeing that grow exponentially as we look forward. So thanks so much for being on the show, Ken.
It's my real pleasure.
Hey, well, if you're just joining us, this is really episode 2 of this conversation with Dr. Ken Jennings. Last episode, we talked a little bit about the 5 things that servant leaders do. And now today, we're going to be talking about teaming. And so as you heard, Dr. Ken Jennings talked about, man, teaming is the new leading. And what does that mean? And so Mike, you and I are going to have this conversation. We're going to kind of dive into it, pull this apart a little bit. If you've heard Dr. Ken Jennings before, you know he is packed full of these amazing big nuggets of value and information. And our conversation is going to be diving a little bit deeper of how does that apply and what does that look like on a day-to-day basis. And so talk a little bit about this teaming is the new leading. What is teaming? What does that look like when you're in an organization?
Yeah, I think that the serving leader is the foundation for everything we're still talking about. What's different right now about the work environment and just culture in general is it's less of an individual and more of a community, a practice together. And this is an important shift that we're seeing. And so teaming is this idea that as a leader, you're not just a solo person out there. Leadership's not a solo sport. It's a team effort. And that at times you're going to take leadership of some area, but you're also sharing leadership with others. And so in order to come together either with a team over a long haul or what's happening right now, we see a lot is teaming on particular projects. People come together for a short period, they work on something, they get it done, and then they go and they team with somebody else. So to be able to form a team very quickly to get things done and be able to do that is really the new skill set that's needed for leadership and being effective in our culture today.
Mhm. Yeah, so I know that Ken has said, a couple of the reasons why he believes that this is the new way of leading is because of the complexity and the change that is required when it comes to projects, when we are hitting major, mountains before us, that their problems are becoming more complex as time goes on. And the great thing about teaming is, it allows room for those kind of complexities and it allows flexibility and change as we move forward. What would you say would be kind of the whys of teaming being the new thing?
Yeah, in addition to that complexity and, silos needing to be broken down, I just jotted down 5 things that I'm observing as I hear leaders and work with organizations and practicing and, in our own local church here and other environments, so some of the things that we're seeing. So, one is COVID, the post-COVID reality, which is a lot of the reason why we're starting this podcast right now is to address some real stuff that people are going through. And one of the things we're seeing is that, people are very hesitant to come back in and just jump all into work. They had a particular rhythm or routine they were in before COVID. And now they're stepping back and asking, hey, do I really want to do all of that? Is it really worth it? Right. We talked about that on the first episode. So teaming provides a way to provide leadership in bite-sized chunks for people who want to come back, want to weigh in, want to engage at work, but are not quite ready to just take all that load back on. Sharing and teaming is a way to provide that, in bite-sized chunks. So COVID is one. Second thing I see is this kind of generational differences. We were talking earlier, when I was growing up, even like thinking about my grandparents who grew up through the Great Depression and then my parents, a strong work ethic was really like a number one value. We want people who have a strong work ethic. But what we're seeing now is a strong work ethic as a value in itself is really being replaced by the idea of work-life balance, meaning I do want to work hard, but I also want to be impactful with my family. I also want to lead in my community, that there's more to life than just my 9 to 5. And so there's some generational differences at kind of even at the value level, not just idea level, really at the core value level that we're starting to see. So teaming provides an opportunity to share that responsibility, which frees you up to be in other environments as well. Also, thirdly, ego. Ken talked about the serving leader keeping their ego in check, and we talked about last session upending that pyramid. Well, when you're part of a team, there's no room for ego. They sort of joke there's no I in team. People say, well, there is a me, but we is greater than me. We is greater than me. And in a team,
That's
yeah, when you win as a team, you share the glory. When you lose as a team, you experience that together. You own that responsibility together. So that responsibility, it hardwires humility. You have to be able to relate to other people, and no one person gets all the credit in a team environment. So I think it's a great practical check for leaders to say, hey, am I really humble? Am I really willing to share? The fourth thing is diversity. We used to see the picture of a leader being Superman or Wonder Woman, maybe kind of the solo person, but now we see something more like an Avengers approach. And that shared approach means that everybody can bring their own strength, right? Every Avenger has their own superpower. And it's the collective putting of those superpowers together that makes the team super, makes it great, And so diversity and on all the senses of diversity, it allows those differences to come together and everybody to bring their best contribution to make the team greater. And then the last thing is I'm seeing a lot of transition and succession planning starting to happen right now. And so there are a generation, largely my age or older, who built big things. And now they're wanting to hand those off to people, big businesses, big, hospital systems, big churches. And the next generation is saying, I don't know that I want to take that big thing on. And so instead of trying to take one person's huge responsibility and put it on the shoulders of another one person's responsibility to share that leadership, is able to disseminate that. And when you're in leadership succession or transition, it allows each person to kind of step into a part of that role, part of that responsibility, without having to take the whole thing on. And then as those who are making the handoffs, you're able to see how that response goes and who really does fit well and who responds well to that responsibility. So it's a way to kind of mitigate the risk in succession and planning and making the transition with any kind of organization or team that you're leading. So those are the kind of things that I see that people are wrestling with day in and day out. And I think that's why right now teaming really is the new leading.
Yeah. And I love the scenario that you gave, Dr. Ken, because you talked about having people come from different departments even and coming together and working. It's not just people just within your group, right? Which is what creates these silos. And you don't get the diversity and you don't get kind of the strengths and weaknesses. You're just kind of working with people that are similar to yours. So when you open yourself up to different areas within an organization, you create this really multifaceted think tank. And that's kind of where that collaboration, the creativity can start sparking. I always think that, it's a risk, right? That's scary thing about teaming is that you can start to like grind against somebody that's in a different department, or there's kind of it might spark something that's like, well, this we're doing it right, you're doing it wrong. And so when you come at teaming with that kind of different philosophy of, man, we're all going to go to a greater goal together and we share. And it creates this conversation of discovery and empathy and understanding. And we get rid of the silos and we create that collaboration. And I think that as much as we may want the glory all for ourselves, really what we want is we do want to just win. It just feels good to win.
Yeah, that's right.
And silos really prevent that. So I love this idea of coming together and teaming together.
Yeah, you're making me think is this analogy of we do want to win, and think of like a travel destination kind of idea, that if we're like on a journey, we're going somewhere together, that we want to get to the destination, right? And historically, I think everybody's kind of stayed in their own lane, so everybody's had this lane, this lane, this lane. In some ways, it's clearer because you know your boundaries, you know your boundaries, you know your boundaries. But what's happening with teaming is it's like merging all together. And so that's the fun, that's the collaboration. It's also could be a collision, like that's the risk. Is what about when we come together and it blows up and the relationships aren't good and I don't trust you and you're letting me down and I'm trying to carry all the load here, so it's all of there's reasons why people don't team, because there is risk, there is challenge to that. And essentially what we're talking about is like hopping in one car and going together, and maybe sharing who's driving this time, so one time I'm in the driver's seat and you're in the passenger seat, or I'm willing to sit in the back seat in this case, if it's needed, willing to kind of take turns, but eventually you get to the destination.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a little bit of rest. Nobody's had to drive the whole time, and hey, you've had fun. Like one of the greatest things about taking a journey is the journey, it is the destination, but the journey is part of it too. And so bringing some joy back into work, especially with people who are in high consequence situations or really weighty. A lot of the leaders who are listening today, they're running healthcare organizations. They're on the front lines. They're, principals, school teachers, pastors, ministers, they're carrying a lot of weight. And man, when it's just about slugging it out day in and day out, that gets super heavy. So bringing a little bit of joy into that. I remember talking with some folks who are doing behavioral health, and they were like talking about the challenge and the weight. They're like, we just want to bring some enjoyment back into our job. Like that's actually one of our values is enjoyment, right? Because we got into this for a reason. We've had a passion. We love to do it. It's easy to lose that. So I think those are some of the benefits and risks of navigating that, collaboration that can also turn into a collision if it's not handled well.
I think that's a great picture because what's required now is a perspective change, that I'm not in just my lane with my car going against someone else in the lane in their car. we're in a car together in its
Yes.
outer lane. That changes everything. So I love that picture. Tell us a little bit about, what does that look like then when you gather a team? Where do you go from
Yeah.
there?
Well, I was thinking about that because, one of the best things about traveling in the car together, maybe it's summer mode, something about family trips a little bit,
Yeah.
my family van and all the kids. But one of the greatest things about, family trips are the conversations that happen. And that's what's different about solo leadership and teaming is the quality of the conversations. That's really the measure of success. And so what we find working with a lot of leaders right now is, and in particular, and not just generation, but the younger generation also challenges with just used to being handling things over text messages or single outputs, but not actually sitting down face to face having conversations. And face to face can still be virtually over a screen like this, but actually having two-way dialogue, right? So the question becomes when you're working with a team, you're getting in the car together. What conversations do you need to be able to have together in order to get to the destination? And generally speaking, I think there's a couple of different categories. Some are like the type of conversations, meaning are they strategic conversations? Are we defining, hey, where do we want to go? What's the best route to take? Right? Are we all agreeing that we want to go on this trip together? So more of the high level strategic conversations. And then it really gets into more tactical or management conversations, which is like, well, what stops are we going to take along the way? We have 4 different routes. What's the best route to go? Or if there's a traffic jam, how are we going to reroute ourselves? So it's really like strategic conversations and then tactical conversations that you want to have. And I think it's helpful to know what kind of conversation we're having there. The other thing I've seen on that is basically where you are in the workflow. So at the beginning of work, in the middle of work, and at the end of work, really important types of conversations that need to happen. At the beginning of the work, having kind of common destination, shared outcomes we want. What are the assets? Where are we currently, our current reality, and what's it going to take to get there? Having those on the front end, doing that together, defining those, getting in the car and charting that course. In the middle, like while you're on the road, if you will, a little bit of check-ins. We call them sync-ups or check-ins. So everybody's doing their individual work, and then they kind of come back into the car. Working in teaming is almost like that. We jump in the car, we go together, then we hop out for different parts, then we come back together. And so how do we have those sync-ups midway along the way? And then at the end of work, you're really talking about something like an after-action review. How can we look back and learn from what we've done? Because next time we're going to get in the car and we want to be able to, go further, faster together. So before, during, and after work become important conversations. And we have tools and resources to help people have all those kind of conversations. And I find that may be the biggest help right now is if somebody's going to make that switch between a solo leader and a teaming leader, what's the actual structure and format for having those different kind of conversations?
Yeah, that's excellent. I can't tell you how many times I've been in meetings where I'm like, I don't know what this meeting is about or why we're having this meeting, and I don't know where we're going in this meeting. And so I think as leaders determining those things together, it's excellent. I know that you actually have a really good structure questions that is a resource for our listeners. And so if you are interested in getting that resource into your hand, Mike has it kind of laid out step-by-step questions of determining what kind of meeting you're having and what kind of questions to have within those meetings. We have that link in our description. So click that link, put your email in, we'll send you that resource. That's kind of what this podcast is about, getting resources into your guys' hands. Mike, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you wanted to add about teaming, about what's coming up next? Who do we have next on the docket?
Yeah, super excited to start to delve into this idea of diversity. One of the big parts about teaming is how do you bring in different perspectives and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We're really going to get to the heart of what's really at stake with diversity is this really heart of belonging. I'm really looking forward to having our guest, Arthur Satterwhite, who's just an expert in this area. He lives it. He practices it. He helps leaders do it all across the country, literally the world. And so we're going to be really excited and and fortunate to have him on the episode next time.
That's awesome. Hey, share this podcast with your friends. You guys are not going to want to miss that. Until next time. Thanks, Mike.
See you, Genevieve. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the High Purpose Leadership Podcast. To work with Dr. Mike McCormick, head over to highpurposepractice.com.